Hey, we all have our favorite video game franchise that regularly gives us polished titles filled with hours of fun and unforgettable moments. But sometimes even the most beloved series can crash and burn with just one bad release. Whether it's through poor decisions, technical disasters, or just missing the mark completely, some games have seriously damaged their franchise. From Duke Nukem Forever to Mass Effect Andromeda, these games are reminders of how quickly things can go wrong for a gaming franchise. The games on this list show how hard it can be to keep a franchise alive and kicking. While many of these series started off strong, their later games just couldn't live up to the hype. These titles didn't just flop, they put a dent in the legacies of franchises that once had so much potential. It's a sad reminder that even the best ideas can fall flat, but hey, that's what makes us appreciate the great games even more. Fear made a huge impact on the gaming industry when it was released in 2005, scaring players with its mix of intense combat and eerie horror. Alma Wade became one of gaming's most iconic characters, and the game's tense atmosphere and cinematic effects made it a standout in the horror shooter genre for its time. But with the release of Fear 2, it felt like the franchise began to lose its edge. It shifted more towards traditional shooter mechanics, shedding much of the horror that made the original such a hit. Then came Fear 3, which took the series even further off course. The game's name changed to F3AR, which was a common marketing ploy at the time, but fans really did hate it. Copying other shooters at the time, it added multiplayer modes which completely missed the mark. What people loved about Fear was its atmosphere and terrifying moments. Adding multiplayer just didn't fit the game. Even worse, the horror elements were almost entirely dropped in favor of a more action-focused experience. Fear 3 was unable to deliver a memorable action or horror experience for their hardcore fan. What had once been an innovative franchise now felt unrecognizable. Fear 3 lacked the heart of the original, and for many it marked the end of the franchise's glory days. The SimCity series has long been a cornerstone of city-building game, revolutionizing the genre with the original 1989 release. Games like SimCity 2000 and SimCity 4 cemented the franchise's reputation, setting the universal standard for what a simulation game should be. But then came SimCity 2013, a reboot that ultimately killed its legacy. Fans were initially hopeful about the game's new features like multiplayer and region-wide gameplay. However, the reality was far from expectations. The most glaring issue was the always-online requirement imposed on the game. Then on its release, there were server outages that kept people from playing the game, and after finally going back online, the game was a buggy mess, and online play was severely limited. While the game was patched later, the damage was already done, and most people had shelved the game for good. Longtime fans who stuck around felt the game had been stripped down and lacked the depth of its predecessors. Regional play was limited and confusing, and the absence of offline play alienated many fans of the original game. SimCity 2013 quickly became a massive flop for the franchise, which led to the closure of Maxis's main studio in Emeryville by parent company EA. EA shelved the SimCity franchise while Maxis continued to work on the sim. Now overshadowed by games like Cities Skylines, it's unlikely that EA will ever okay a new SimCity game. The Mass Effect series is known for its incredible storytelling, rich lore, and unforgettable characters, with the original trilogy especially capturing the hearts of gamers. The game's fantastic story and charismatic protagonist Commander Shepard quickly made the series an instant success, offering emotional depth and meaningful player-driven decisions. However, Mass Effect Andromeda struggled to live up to the legacy of its predecessors. Despite positive changes like a more fluid combat system and better character customization, it was plagued by technical issues that overshadowed the improvements. Glitches, awkward animations, and stiff character models became a running joke, breaking immersion and leaving players disappointed. Andromeda's story, set on the galaxy's edge, also failed to connect emotionally like the original trilogy. While it didn't interfere with the existing lore, it felt like a hollow attempt at continuing the story after Mass Effect 3's climactic end
end to the franchise. The chaotic production and rushed development meant the game lacked polish when it finally released, and the characters weren't as memorable as the beloved crew from the first 3 games. Mass Effect Andromeda took a great trilogy that was neatly wrapped in a bow and pushed it past its welcome, ultimately tarnishing the Mass Effect brand. Fans who were once content with the series' finality are now left with a sense of disappointment as the series enters a hiatus with an unfinished story. The Dead Space series was a standout in survival horror, known for its intense atmosphere, innovative combat, and terrifying world building. The first 2 games earned a place in horror fans' hearts for their isolation, eerie environments, and grotesque monsters. However, Dead Space 3 marked a turning point for the franchise that would ultimately lead to the series' decline. The first 2 entries thrived on horror, claustrophobia, and suspense, but Dead Space 3 took a more action-oriented approach. This change alienated longtime fans as the game traded scares for explosions and big set pieces. The addition of co-op play removed the isolation that made the earlier games so terrifying. But the nail in the coffin was a microtransaction system tied directly to the campaign, allowing you to buy resources to upgrade gear instead of scavenging for them, making the game feel more focused on monetization than fun gameplay. While Dead Space 3 offers a deeper weapon customization system and co-op play, these couldn't compensate for the watered down experience. The game's shift in tone disappointed fans, and it underperformed in sales. The backlash contributed to the closure of Visceral Games and left the series in video game limbo. Despite a successful remake of the first game and a cancelled remake of the second game, Dead Space 3 remains the moment the franchise died. Dead Rising had a unique blend of wacky weapons, over-the-top violence, and time pressure that made every decision feel like life and death. The sequel built on that chaos, added better graphics and better control. When Dead Rising 3 came out, it slightly expanded the world, taking the protagonist out of the mall and into a city. The crafting system was revamped, there were more vehicles, better combat, and you could render 3 times as many zombies. But the series had already started to drift from a close quarters beat-em-up to an open world arcade survival game. When Dead Rising 4 finally released, the game had cranked the wacky combat to 11 and made the world even bigger, but it also removed a lot of personality from the franchise. They removed the challenging survivor escort missions. They brought back the protagonist from the first game, Frank West, and changed him from a witty seasoned journalist to a wisecracking jerk who seemed to take nothing seriously. They also added an inventory management system that players didn't want, and added an autosave feature that made the game much easier. While the game wasn't terrible, it strayed too far from the franchise's roots. The most noticeable change was the removal of the iconic time limit, which removed most of the tension from the game. Without it, Dead Rising 4 felt like a pointless slog. The Christmas setting, complete with cheesy decorations, felt awkward and out of place, and the boss fights, which were once a highlight of the series, were now forgettable. Gone were the quirky, memorable characters, replaced by generic enemies with no personality. With the cancellation of Dead Rising 5, it seems that the franchise's fate has been sealed. Duke Nukem's journey began in 1991, introducing players to a brash, wisecracking action hero who became a gaming icon in 1996 with Duke Nukem 3D. The over-the-top violence, crude humor, and pop culture references made it a standout in first-person shooters. Fans eagerly awaited the next installment, but everything changed with Duke Nukem Forever. Announced in 1997, Duke Nukem Forever became notorious for its lengthy, troubled development, with constant delays stretching into a decade of anticipation. When the game finally released in 2011, it felt outdated, like Duke had been stuck in a time capsule. The game was criticized across the board. From clunky mechanics to buggy performance and outdated designs, Duke Nukem Forever left fans disappointed. What was once fresh and bold now felt tired and like a relic of the past. The humor, which had once been daring, came off as awkward and borderline offensive. Fans of Duke Nukem 3D quickly realized that the franchise had lost its edge and moved on to other franchises that were innovating.
Metal Gear Solid was once a crown jewel of gaming, known for its stealth mechanics, intricate storylines, and cinematic flair. But Metal Gear Survive marked a tragic end to the franchise's glory days after the fallout between Hideo Kojima and Konami and the incomplete experience that was Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Fans were disappointed with where the franchise was going. Rather than continue the series' legacy and win over the hearts of their fans, Konami released Metal Gear Survive, a spin-off that felt more like a cash grab than a worthy addition to the Metal Gear Solid roster. Taking a bold but disastrous turn, Metal Gear Survive shifted the franchise to a generic zombie survival game, abandoning the complex political intrigue and stealth that defined the series. The game's monetization tactics, including charging for additional save slots, only made things worse. It was clear Konami had little respect for the franchise or its fans. Metal Gear Survive not only failed to capture the original series' essence, but also underperformed commercially, bringing the franchise to a screeching halt. With the fanbase leaving Konami and following Kojima Productions' new IP Death Stranding, leaving the Metal Gear Solid franchise in limbo. Although a new mainline game has been announced for 2027, fans are unsure if Konami will be able to create an authentic Metal Gear Solid game without Kojima at the wheel. But whether the franchise is able to make a comeback or not, it doesn't matter, because every hardcore fan knows that the franchise died the moment that Hideo Kojima left the studio. The original Crackdown began as a fun, chaotic sandbox adventure, offering players a chance to be super agents taking down criminal organizations in fully destructible environments. The first two games, while flawed, promised a thrilling open-world experience. Fans hoped Crackdown 3 would live up to that potential. Instead, it was a major disappointment. Released in 2019 after multiple delays, Crackdown 3 felt outdated, offering little new in a world where other games like Just Cause had already perfected chaotic destruction. The visuals were lackluster, the gameplay was stale, and the story didn't make sense. The promised ability to destroy everything was overshadowed by a dull, empty world. Despite hype around its cloud-powered destruction and multiplayer mode, Crackdown 3 failed to deliver. The Wrecking Zone multiplayer showed some promise, but it was too late to save the game. By the time it launched, the franchise's glory days seemed long gone, leaving many wondering if it could ever recover. The Command & Conquer series was once a pillar of the real-time strategy genre, defining PC gaming with classics like Red Alert and Tiberian Sun. However, Command & Conquer 4 Tiberian Twilight felt like a betrayal to longtime fans, marking a painful end to the franchise. Tiberian Twilight radically changed what made the series special. It abandoned base building and resource gathering in favor of a more streamlined approach, which many felt lacked the depth and strategy the series was known for. The removal of the Scrin faction and the introduction of always online gameplay also drew heavy criticism, alienating fans who felt the game had lost its soul. The game's story and single-player experience were much worse than previous entries, overshadowed by a focus on multiplayer and online features. EA seemed more focused on capitalizing on online trends rather than improving core gameplay, turning Command & Conquer 4 into a shallow imitation of what the franchise once was. Despite a few forgettable spin-offs, Command & Conquer 4 was the last true mainline game in the franchise. It stripped away what made the series great, killing any hope of a revival and leaving fans to reminisce about the golden days of real-time strategy gaming. The Saints Row series started as a bold, eccentric alternative to Grand Theft Auto. Released in 2006, the first game didn't make a huge impact on launch, but gradually gained a cult following over time thanks to its quirky gameplay and over-the-top antics. Saints Row 2 built on this success, blending its unique humor, over-the-top action, and open-world chaos, earning a loyal fan base. By Saints Row the Third, the story took a hit, but the mechanics were still fun and fresh. It also introduced exciting features like improved visuals and new gameplay mechanics. Saints Row 4 continued the trend, introducing superpowers and a very wacky story, which had fans somewhat divided, but it still
still had its charm. The real downfall of the franchise came in 2022. After years of waiting for a new mainline game, the franchise was rebooted. The reboot failed to capture the chaotic, colorful energy of the earlier games, leaving both longtime fans and newcomers underwhelmed. Saints Row was met with disappointment, plagued by bugs, unpolished mechanics, an empty open world, and a lackluster story. Ultimately, Saints Row went from a unique open world gem to a mundane GTA clone that had lost the majority of its personality.